Before Patagonia was a billion-dollar clothing company, it was a one-man blacksmith shop, Ventura, California. 1972. Yvon Chouinard forged steel pitons, the spikes climbers hammer into rock, by hand, and sold them out of the back of his car. That steel was the entire company, which is what makes what he did next so hard to believe.
Read it back, Tom. The part where we tell our own customers to quit buying the one thing that keeps the lights on.
That is not a slow quarter. That is 70 cents of every dollar this company earns. Yvon Chouinard is looking at his single best product, and he is about to tell the world to stop buying it. Look at the two piles on that bench. The steel is the whole company. The little pile of aluminum beside it is a product almost nobody is buying yet, and it does not scar the rock. Killing the Piton is not just throwing away 70% of the business. It is betting the whole thing on that small pile of aluminum, and on the idea that telling people the ugly truth will make them trust you more.
I shot this last spring. Same crack we've all been hammering for 10 years. Somebody took a chisel to it. That somebody is us.
We told ourselves the mountains were endless. They're not. They're small and they break. And we are the ones selling the hammer.
Then we stop. Quietly. Build the chobs, sell through the steel we've got, let the Piton die on its own. Nobody has to know we lost our nerve. There are people out front who eat off that number, Yvon. You want to bet their jobs on a 14-page sermon?
Quiet changes nothing on the rock. They buy the next box of steel and keep hammering. We have to tell them why we quit. Well, there goes the company. No, there goes the Piton.
So that actually happened. He torched 70 cents of every dollar his company made, on purpose, and it made him bigger. And here's the part that makes no sense. He did it again and again and again for the next 50 years. And anytime somebody told him it wasn't going to work, it got bigger. And nobody's ever explained this, and I'm going to.
Before the forge, the shirts, the layoffs, before any of it, you need to understand something about yourself. You almost certainly own a fleece jacket. There is a real chance it is a Patagonia fleece, or it is a knockoff of one, because the company you are about to watch is the one that invented what outdoor fleece looks like in the first place. Zip the collar up to your chin, the way you have 100 times, and you are wearing a piece of a specific argument a specific man made about what a business is for. The strange part is this. The company that spent 50 years telling you not to buy things is the one that ended up owning the market. It is the whole story, and it only works because every part of it is true. We are going to test it against the record all the way through, including the parts that do not flatter the man who built it. Yvon Chouinard is 19 years old. He is not starting a company. He buys a secondhand, coal-fired forge and teaches himself to be a blacksmith because he wants better climbing gear than anyone is selling. He hand forges steel pitons in his parents' backyard and sells them out of the trunk of his car to other climbers in Yosemite. He is not thinking about a business. He is thinking about the next route up the wall. This matters because it sets the pattern for everything that follows. He does not build a company and then discover a purpose. He has the purpose first, hammer in hand. And the company is just what happens when other people want what he made for himself. Word gets around the climbing camps. A Piton with his mark on it holds better and costs less than the imported European gear everyone had been buying. And by the mid-1960s, he cannot keep up with his own trunk. In 1965, he partners with a fellow climber, Tom Frost, just to keep up with demand. Frost brings the engineering discipline Chouinard's forge never had, and together they turn a one-man side hustle into an actual manufacturer. In the same year, he kills the Pitons. Chouinard founds Patagonia as its own apparel label. The first store, called Great Pacific Iron Works, opens inside a former meatpacking plant in Ventura, California, right next to the blacksmith shop. Steel on one side of the wall, clothing racks on the other. The company literally grows out of the forge. Both businesses run by the same small crew of climbers who would rather be somewhere else. There is no 5-year plan here. No investors in a boardroom sketching a category. Just a man who does not want to be a businessman doing the next useful thing one more time because the last useful thing worked out. So look at what just happened. Chouinard's instinct runs the other way, every time, for the rest of his life. The Piton decision is not a footnote. It is the operating system. Remember the Piton? You are going to watch him do this 2 more times, at a much larger scale, with much more money on the table. And both times, the company nearly does not survive it. Through the 1980s, Patagonia grows the way every venture investor dreams a company will grow, 40 to 50% a year for a decade. Revenue climbs from roughly $20 million to $100 million. Nobody inside the company is asking whether the growth rate itself is a risk. Why would they? Every year, it has been the reason the company has more of everything than the year before. By the end of the decade, the company is a machine running hot, on money it does not have, betting the next year will look like the last one. It will not. The recession hits. Sales growth, which has never once slowed in a decade, goes flat. And the bank that has been extending Patagonia's line of credit does the job a bank is supposed to do. It tightens the line twice in a matter of months. Sit with this for a second, because the instinct is to cast a villain here, and there isn't one. Chouinard himself says so, later, without excuses. He is not blaming the bank. He is blaming himself. Root for the banker here. He was right about the numbers. We were on a suicide course. We were exceeding our limits, financially and mentally. The credit tightens, and there is no cushion underneath the company. Patagonia has to borrow from friends just to make payroll. On a single day, the company lays off 120 its people, roughly 1 in every 5 employees. This is not a headline about a strategy pivot. This is people who forged the culture of the place, gone in an afternoon, because a company that looked unstoppable a year earlier ran out of runway. This is the first near death, not a metaphor. A company that had grown every single year since 1980 is now borrowing from friends to cover a paycheck.
Stop here for a second. It's 1991. He just laid off 1 of every 5 employees in a single day, and the company almost died. Now, watch what he's about to do. Not play it safe. He's about to bet the company all over again, and this is not a fluke, because this is who he is.
The fastest growing outdoor brand in America almost does not make it to 1992. In the wreckage, the board does what boards do. They bring in outside help. A turnaround consultant, someone who had helped pull a famous American company back from the edge of collapse just a few years earlier. Professionalize the company. Cut costs harder. Grow to real scale so the fixed costs stop being a knife at your throat. Or sell. This advice worked at Harley-Davidson. It has worked at 100 companies just like this one. Chouinard listens to it and rejects it anyway. Not out of stubbornness, and not because he thinks the consultant is a fool. He simply cannot make himself want the company the consultant is describing, even if that company survives and this one might not. Root for the consultant too. Instead of the standard fix, the board and Chouinard do something almost nobody does in a financial crisis. They fly to the actual region of Patagonia, in Chile and Argentina, and sit down with an environmental writer named Jerry Mander to rewrite the company's core values from the ground up. Out of that comes a decision that reads, on a spreadsheet, like self-sabotage. Patagonia commits to capping its own growth rate. In the same year, Chouinard writes an internal essay with a title that is also basically a confession, Reality Check. It says the thing most companies spend their whole life not saying. Everything we make pollutes, not competitors' products, not the industry in general. Patagonia's own gear, made by Patagonia's own hands. the same gear the company had just laid off a fifth of its people trying to protect. That essay triggers an audit of everything Patagonia is made from, fiber by fiber, and that audit is about to cost the company a fortune, on purpose. Again, the audit finds something specific and unglamorous. Of every material Patagonia uses, ordinary cotton, the most basic fabric there is the most environmentally damaging one in the entire product line. The pesticide load, the soil damage, the exposure to the farm workers who pick it. The board commits to converting 100% of Patagonia's cotton line to organic cotton on a self-imposed deadline of spring 1996, with no guarantee the supply will exist to cover it. Notice the shape of this decision. It is the Piton decision again, at a much larger scale. Organic cotton, in the mid-1990s, is not an established supply chain. It is farmers scattered here and there, growing at roughly 3 times the cost of conventional cotton, with no infrastructure built to support a company the size Patagonia has become. Other apparel companies try the same thing around the same time. Each one launches a small organic line, and each one quietly drops it within 2 or 3 years. Because it does not pencil out, Patagonia does not quit. The conversion finishes on schedule, and here is what it costs, in real numbers, not a mission statement. The cost of a single flannel shirt in the line rises from $18.15 to $23.89 in 1 year. That is an increase of nearly 32% on a basic product, absorbed rather than fully passed to the customer. The product range itself has to shrink from 91 styles down to 66, simply because there is not enough organic cotton in the world yet to cover the range Patagonia used to offer. Say that back to yourself. A company barely 5 years past laying off a fifth of its workforce voluntarily raises its own costs by nearly a third and shrinks its own product line because of what an internal audit found. This is not one decision. It is a pattern with a body count of its own best-selling products, and every single time, the same man signs off on it. By the 2000s, that instinct had a name and a structure around it. Chouinard put the company into an alliance he helped start, a pledge to give 1% of sales to the environment every year, in good years and bad. The company was no longer a clothing brand that happened to care. It was an argument about consumption, wearing a fleece. And on the biggest shopping day of the American year, it was about to make that argument out loud, in the most expensive room in the country, against the advice of everyone whose job was to sell more.
Keep that tally in your head. Every time this company said, buy less, they sold more. Now, they're about to go say it in the most expensive place in the country on the worst possible day to say it. Watch.
You want me to walk into our biggest week of the year and hang this in the New York Times. A picture of our own jacket. And the words, don't buy it.
It's not a trick, Dana. We print exactly what one jacket costs the planet. The water, the carbon, the waste. Then we ask them to buy it only if they'll actually wear it out.
I have people on the retail floor whose December pays their January. Every other brand in the country spends this week begging people to spend. And we're going to buy the most expensive page in the paper to beg them to stop. If it works, we look like saints. If it doesn't, I'm laying people off in the spring.
Dana's right about the risk. She's wrong about the ask. We're not telling them to buy nothing. We're telling them to buy one thing and keep it 20 years.
On Black Friday.
On Black Friday, when everyone's finally listening.
You're betting the season on their conscience.
I'm betting it on the truth. Let's see if the truth sells.
Sales went up about 30%. Telling people to buy less made them buy more. It was the second time Yvon Chouinard did the thing that was bad for business. It still would not be the last.
It worked! Of course it worked. That's the maddening thing about this company. They told you not to buy the jacket, so what'd you do? You bought more jackets. So, the obvious question is, was any of it ever real? Now, stay with me, because this is where it's going to get uncomfortable.
The ad cost the company about $57,000 to run. It earned an estimated $40 to $50 million in free press coverage. And in the period that follows, Patagonia's sales rise roughly 30%. Read that twice. The company that told you in the biggest newspaper in the country not to buy its best product sold more of it. The second complication is older, and it comes from inside the company's own audits, not from an outside investigation. Patagonia extends its supply chain checks past its own factories, down to the mills that make its raw fabric. In Taiwan, the audit finds migrant workers paying labor brokers placement fees as high as $7,000 just to get the job. That is not a normal hiring cost. That is the structure of debt bondage. Workers going into debt before their first shift, weaving fabric for the company that tells you not to buy the jacket. That is allowed to sting for a second. This film is not going to rush past it. Patagonia discloses this itself publicly, describing egregious employment practices across 7 suppliers, later found across its wider Taiwan supplier base, and rolls out a remediation policy company-wide. Nobody exposed this. Patagonia found it because it went looking and then told you what it found. In 2017, Forbes put Yvon Chouinard on its list of the world's billionaires at an estimated $1.2 billion. For most founders, that number is the finish line. Chouinard called it one of the worst days of his life. It really, really pissed him off, he said, and he was not performing modesty for a camera. He did not want the money, and he spent the next several years trying to figure out what to do about it instead of enjoying it. It really, really pissed me off.
In 2017, they told him he was a billionaire. Most founders would frame that. He said it was the worst day of his life. And then he did the math on giving it all away. Watch this, because he's going to do the most expensive thing anyone does in this story.
There are 2 clean ways to do this, Yvon. You sell to a buyer who signs every promise you want, and your family never worries about money again. Or you take it public, and you use the war chest to do 100 times the good you can do broke. Both are responsible. Both are legal.
A buyer answers to whoever he sells to next. The public answers to next quarter. I spent 50 years getting out from under people who only ask what a thing earns. I'm not signing my company back to them on the way out the door.
Then walk away rich and give the money yourself. Nobody in the world would blame you. You built this. Your children built this. And you're about to hand all of it to a trust that will never pay a single one of you back. Once it's signed, it's gone. You can't change your mind.
We talked about it. All of us. None of us want to be billionaires. We'd rather have the planet than money we were never going to spend.
You understand, once you sign this, there is no version of Patagonia you get back.
So who owns Patagonia now? Earth is now our only shareholder.
About $100 million of Patagonia's profit now goes, every year, to fight for the planet. It was the last time Yvon Chouinard did the thing that was bad for business, and the biggest. 50 years earlier, in a tin shed, he bet the whole company on a handful of aluminum. He never stopped betting it. And every time the world called it a bad bet, the business only got bigger. He gave it all away. $3 billion gone in a way nobody can ever undo. And I know what you are thinking, because I thought it too. There has to be a catch. A tax angle, a loophole, something. So let's actually check. I owe you the honest version. So here is what the family actually does with the company. 2% of the stock, all of the voting shares, goes into a trust built to lock Patagonia's values in place permanently. No one ever again can vote to sell the company or change what it stands for. The other 98%, all of the economic value, roughly $3 billion, goes to a nonprofit called the Holdfast Collective, which will receive Patagonia's profits above what the business needs to reinvest in itself, something like $100 million a year. Instead of extracting value from nature and transforming it into wealth, we are using the wealth Patagonia creates to protect the source and spend it fighting climate change and protecting undeveloped land. Every other option on the table, taking the company public, selling to a competitor, bringing in a private equity partner, risked the same thing. Someone else, eventually, deciding what Patagonia is for. The way the bank almost decided in 1991, the way the consultant recommended in the same year. Here is the part I have to be straight with you about. Structuring it as a gift instead of a sale did dodge somewhere around $700 million in tax. That is real, and it belongs in this film. Patagonia says nobody asked them to build it that way. Both of those can be true. I am not going to pretend one cancels the other. The Chouinard family transfers ownership of Patagonia. 98% of the company, worth roughly $3 billion, goes to a nonprofit. We will get to what that nonprofit does. First, the honest complication. Structuring the transfer as a donation instead of a sale avoided roughly $700 million in federal capital gains tax. Patagonia's official response is on the record, and we are going to give it to you in full. There are no estate or capital gains taxes, because there are no generational gifts or capital gains. There was never an ask from anyone in the Chouinard family that we create a structure to avoid taxes. Set the mission statement aside for a second. On its own, the number is $700 million. Money a sale would have sent to the Treasury. That did not go. Here is the version of this story that should have happened. By every rule the industry runs on, a company that refuses to grow gets outspent by a competitor who doesn't. A company that raises its own costs on purpose gets undercut on price. A company that tells its customers not to buy things eventually runs out of customers. None of that happened. By the time the ownership transfer happens in 2022, Patagonia is worth roughly $3 billion, privately held, debt-light, still run on the same values Chouinard and the board wrote down in Patagonia, Chile, and Argentina 3 decades earlier. Competitors who chased scale in the same decades, who took the debt, who took the private equity, mostly did not make it this far intact, or made it here having sold off the thing that made them worth watching in the first place. Chouinard was betting the world could be persuaded to want something different from a company than it had ever wanted before. Go back to the gear table in Yosemite, 1972. A man looking at his own best-selling product, deciding to kill it. None of this reads as strategy in the moment. Each time, it reads like the company sabotaging itself, and the people telling him to stop, the bank, the consultant, were not fools. They were right about the numbers every single time. Chouinard was right about something the numbers do not measure, that a company built to be trusted for 50 years beats a company built to be big for 5. You have been sold buy more your whole life. Here is a company that got richer every time it told you the opposite, and meant it enough to prove it with its own money, its own product line, its own bonus checks, its own layoffs. It was not always right to do it this way. The bank was right in 1991. The consultant was right in 1991. A company that bets against its own numbers loses that bet most of the time, in most industries, for most owners. This is the one that didn't. And it is worth knowing exactly how much it cost and exactly what it was not, before you believe the version with no complications in it. The next time you reach for something you already own instead of replacing it, that instinct has a business case behind it now. Somebody built one on purpose by refusing to grow.
There is a word for it. The word is clean.
A man who kept betting against his own business and kept winning. It does not resolve, and I think that is the point. He was right about the one thing a spreadsheet cannot measure, that a company built to be trusted for 50 years beats a company built to be big for 5. Next time you fix the thing you already own instead of replacing it, there is a business case behind that now. Somebody built it. On purpose. By refusing to grow. One more thing. While we were finishing this film, this showed up in my fridge. A Patagonia beer. Non-alcoholic, brewed with a grain that rebuilds the soil it grows in. Made up the road from me in Bend, Oregon. He gave the company away almost 4 years ago. The method is still shipping. That is what clean compounds into.